Comes from the book of Genesis, chapter 22, verses 1 through 8. It's on page 17 of your Pew Bible, if you would like to follow along. Let's listen for the word of God. After these things came, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham," and he said, "Here I am." He said, "Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I shall show you." So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, and his son Isaac. He cut the wood for the burnt offering, and set out and went to the place in the distance that God had shown him. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place far away. Then Abraham said to his young men, "Stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood of the burnt offerings and laid it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. So the 2 of them walked on together. Isaac said to his father Abraham, "Father," and he said, "Here I am, my son." He said, "The fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham said, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." So the 2 of them walked on together. This is the word of the Lord.
Well, good morning, friends. It is good to be with you, good to return to the community of Irvington, where my sons were born when I pastored the Irvington Friends Meeting, which is just down the road and around the corner from here. But I remember when they were little and we had a double stroller and would go for long, long walks. On summer evenings, we would walk past this place, and I would look at it and wonder what it was like to be Presbyterian. My hometown was founded by Quakers, and when I was a kid, I found myself wishing it had been founded by Presbyterians, people who could let their hair down every now and then, unlike the Quakers, who were pretty short-haired people, and are to this day. I left Irvington Meeting and moved back to Danville, and have sometimes regretted that, thinking I should have stayed in Irvington, but what can you do? And now I pastor a Quaker meeting over by the airport. I've been there now for 22 years, and a good long while, and it's a good meeting, but they're not Presbyterians. They don't sing like you all sing, because for our first 200 years we did not sing in Quaker meetings. And now we do sing, but we feel terribly guilty about it, and so we don't sing very well. So to come and sing, we haven't sang in a year and a half at our meeting, so this is so nice. This is so nice. Every now and then, though, people show up and make things interesting for us. Former Methodists and Episcopalians and people who aren't Quaker and have something to teach us about the wider religious world. A few years ago, we had a Jewish man show up named Russ, who was the teacher of world religions at DePaul University out in Greencastle, and fell in love with an evangelical Christian woman, and were presented with this huge quandary. Did he become an evangelical Christian, or did she become Jewish? And they couldn't decide. And so they came to our meeting and said, "If we come here, will you try to convert us out of Judaism?" And I said, "No, we're pretty evangelically bashful, the Quakers are. We're hard on one another, but we're take it easy on others. And so they stuck around. And because he was such a gifted scholar, I asked him if he would teach a Sunday school class, which is how we get Sunday school teachers in our church. We ask the new people who haven't figured us out yet to do it. And so he agreed to do this, and he was just a wonderful teacher, just a wonderful teacher. During one class, he told us the story that Maureen just read of Abraham binding his son Isaac to an altar to sacrifice him, apparently under the command of God. I grew up hearing all of these wonderful things about Abraham, but any man who would do that to his child is, as a psychiatrist might say, nuts. Nuts. I don't care what voice he thought he heard. Apparently, his wife, Sarah, was infuriated by all of this. Russ pointed out that according to many rabbinical traditions, Abraham and Sarah stopped living together after this. She lived in Hebron in the land of Canaan, and he lived in Beersheba. They died, according to the rabbinical tradition, apart and estranged, all because of what happened that day. The name Isaac means he laughs, because Sarah, who had been childless, was old when Isaac was born and said people would die laughing when they heard she was pregnant. So she gave birth to laughter and loved her son with all of her heart, as only a parent can when they are gifted with a child they never anticipated. Which explains her separation from Abraham when she heard what he had almost done to their son. Can't you just imagine Abraham telling Isaac on the way home, "There's no need to tell your mother about this. We'll keep it between us." But you know how kids are. Isaac must have told, because Sarah packed her bags and got an apartment in Hebron, 26 miles away. One more instance in the long and tragic history of men behaving as if women had no say. Sarah would not stand for it. I like Sarah. I like Sarah and think of her often. I think of Sarah every time men start wars and send the children of women to die. I think of Sarah whenever men are cruel and separate children from their mothers for the crime of seeking a better life elsewhere. I think of Sarah whenever men control the bodies of women. I like Sarah. I like that she would no longer live with a man who had been willing to kill her beloved son. I like that she could not pretend everything was okay when it was not okay. I like that in her old age, with few resources at her disposal, she was able to say, "I would rather live alone than with a man who would place our children on an altar and slice him open." Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are Abrahamic faiths. That is, they are monotheistic faiths who worship the God of Abraham. So I grew up, as you probably did too, hearing the pastors of my youth extol in solemn voices the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, as if it were an incantation. Well, let me be clear. I am done with Abraham and his God. I am standing with the God of Sarah. I want nothing to do with a God who would command a father to kill his son in order to test that father's faith. I am done with that God, and I am done with Abraham, who lacked the courage to say to his God what clearly needed to be said. What you ask of me is evil, and I will not do it. I am done with Abraham, and I am done with Abraham's God. I am standing with the God of Sarah. Now, if Abraham were following the leading of God, then can we also assume Sarah, who the Bible describes as a woman of great faith and piety, was also following a divine leading when she packed her bags and left? If so, I am standing with the God who whispered in Sarah's ear, "There is a better life for you in Hebron. Pack your bags, it's time to go." I have seen this God in other moments, in other persons. I have seen that God in Mary Magdalene, falsely condemned by the historic church as a prostitute, who stood with courage by the dying Jesus long after Peter, James, and John had fled. I have seen that God in Theodora, the 6th century Empress of Byzantine, one of the first rulers to recognize the rights of women, who worked tirelessly to prohibit the sex trafficking of young girls. I have seen that God in Elizabeth Fry, the prison reformer, whose work improved the lives of the imprisoned, the sick, and the mentally ill. I am standing with that God. I am standing with the God who whispered in the ear of Rosa Parks, "Keep your seat, you've earned your rest." Today I am standing with the God who is standing with the Central and South American mothers, those whose homelands have been torn asunder by our nation's insatiable hunger for drugs. Mothers who would rather be separated from their children than see them killed. The vestiges of Abraham's God are still with us and still a source for great power and calamity in our land. That God is worshiped by those who would compel a woman to bear a child she had no say in creating, then do nothing to assist her. The Benedictine nun, Sister Joan Chittister, so rightly and boldly said, "I do not believe that just because you are opposed to abortion, that makes you pro-life. In fact," she said, "I think your morality is deeply lacking. If all you want is a child born, but not a child fed, not a child educated, not a child housed." The vestiges of Abraham's God are still with us when fathers make war that cost mothers their children. The vestiges of Abraham's God are still with us when men spend trillions of dollars on war while children go hungry and schools go broke. The vestiges of Abraham's God are still with us when single mothers toil in 2 or 3 jobs and still cannot support their families. The vestiges of Abraham's God are still with us when universal health care is dismissed as socialism, when birth control is limited, when tax dollars are extracted from the poor to enrich the elite. The vestiges of Abraham's God are still with us when the rights of women are struck down, when the perspective of women isn't sought, when men do what they wish while women suffer what they must. That is why I am standing with the God of Sarah, who long ago whispered in her ear, "There is a better life in Hebron. Let us go there together."